but my virtual background makes my fingers disappear and it's not real friendly. So how is everybody doing? I hope everybody is as excited as I am about this. I know I have often tried to follow important pieces of legislation, especially recently about the Holyoke Soldiers Home. And I have had difficulties navigating the website for the Mass Legislature. And I think that this is a great opportunity to learn how to use this website, how to make the most of the information that's on there. If you are interested for your organization in advocating about different pieces of legislation, this is a great way to track what's going on. We can find out when public hearings are being held. We can also follow the budget. And I don't think there are any nonprofits in the Valley who are not interested in what is happening with the state budget. So I am very glad to see everybody here. Jeff is our normal host on these calls, and I feel like I'm in the wrong chair. And I would like to say thank you to Mindy and Katie for helping us set this up. We have been interested in bringing back speakers to our COSA calls, so it is exciting to get a foothold on that. So I guess, Mindy, do you want to take it away and give a little intro?
Sure, unless Jeff wants to say a few words since we're crowding and we're stepping in his bed.
No. I would just say thank you for Mindy and Victoria for setting this up.
Well, yeah, of course. I realize, so my turn to say thank you is to say thank you not only to COSA for bringing people together on a regular basis to share best practices and information and referrals and resources, but I get to express my deep gratitude to Paul Pack, who's our guest speaker. And so I'm going to take a few moments just to introduce Paul and then hand it over to him. And I've done a little research, Paul. So he is the Chief Information Officer for the Massachusetts State House and for the Legislature, where he's worked for the past 8 years. And in this position, he's responsible for the IT strategy and application development roadmap, services and platforms for the Massachusetts State House, which basically means any rep or senator who needs something, has a problem with something IT related, we go to him and he makes it all better. And he does it with a smile and with like an incredible big-hearted generosity. As the state rep for the 3rd Hampshire district, I'm really proud when I found out that he is a graduate of UMass Amherst. That's awesome. So you're familiar with my district. But he is really one of the most supportive and kindest people you'll ever meet in the State House. He troubleshoots shortcuts for us. And when I asked him a while ago if he would be interested in doing these kind of webinars to sort of give an inside view to the website so that people could see exactly what information they could get from the website that would be helpful, he enthusiastically said yes. And didn't hesitate to say, of course, let's do that. So I really want to thank him for your enthusiasm, your assistance, and for your participation this morning. I also just want to point out a brief housekeeping item. Katie O'Leary in my office is with us also, and so she's going to be troubleshooting a little bit. If you have any problems, you should kind of put it in the chat. There'll be a brief Q&A, so you can either hold on to your question or you can put it in the chat. And we are going to be recording this so that people who couldn't come today will be able to still see it, since the information is going to be relevant for at least more than just this morning. So I hope that's okay with everybody. And so I think that what that means is, since it's mostly a presentation, you won't be seen, Paul will be seen. But if you ask a question, I think your name may appear. So just so that you know that. So without further ado, I'd really love to introduce Paul Pack and welcome you to remotely anyway to Western Massachusetts.
Right.
And I hope we can get you back here in person when things settle down. But thank you so much, Paul, and I'm looking forward to this morning.
Oh, it's awesome. Thank you so much, Representative Dom, for the opportunity to be with you here and just to talk a few minutes about our website. I always jump at the chance to do that, and I definitely wanted to do that when she reached out to me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll try to keep this brief. I want to encourage questions at any time, and I'll do my best to answer questions right then and there. If for whatever reason I can't answer your question, I'll definitely follow up with an answer in an email. In my last slide of my deck, I'll put my contact info in there so you can actually reach out to me via email and ask me questions about anything, technology, about the site, technology in the site. If it's something that I can answer, I'll certainly try to do that. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be with you today. I had a presentation put together, but based on some input that I'm hearing, I really want to make sure that I can focus on some of the questions and the interests that you have. I can briefly talk about the site. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. And I'll share a couple of different things. Okay, well, I'll start out with obviously the obligatory PowerPoint, right? It sounds like the majority of you or some of you have already been to our site. And for those of you who haven't, the web address is www.malegislature.gov. Can everyone see my slide deck? Okay, great. So that's the website. I always find it hard to type and to say. So I actually just tell people you can also go to mahouse.gov. You can go to masenate.gov. It'll spin around for a few seconds to redirect, but it'll bring you back to the same place. And I also really love the way Representative Dom has sort of framed this webinar, or this portion of the webinar. I agree with her. I really earnestly look at our site, the legislature's website, as a way for residents of the Commonwealth to educate, advocate, and engage with state government. And at the end of the day, that's really what this is sort of all about. And again, I apologize in advance for my hoarseness. I was just telling the representative how I just am getting adversely reacted to my first shot for the vaccine. So if I keel over mid-presentation, you'll know why. All right. I'm not going to spend too much time on these slides rather. I'm going to briefly talk about the site, do a sort of site tour, talk about some secrets of the site if that's interesting to anybody, things that people may not know about the site, and how to really, sounds like to me anyway, sort of the meat of the conversation, how to follow bills, how to track legislation, how to get updates and notifications on things. And if there are any questions at the end, we can certainly talk about them. All right, so let's start that tour. I was originally going to go talk about all these different parts, but I realized that, that would take too long and it wouldn't have a sort of the appropriate context. I think the best way to do this is sort of maybe a walkthrough in the day of the life of someone using the site. And I can quickly show you what I mean there. But it should come as no surprise that as the legislature's website, you're going to find a lot of information on legislators. You'll find things on committees and committee assignments. We can show you things like the bills and bill histories. A plethora of information on bills obviously makes a lot of sense there. The budget has its own dedicated portion of the site just for that, just because it's an important thing that happens within the legislature every year. And then I'll talk briefly about my legislature, which is something that a lot of people don't know about, even though it's sort of tucked in the corner there. It's a way to sign up for the site, create an account profile for free, and it kind of wraps and ties things up together. And you'll kind of see that in a moment. All right, so with that, I'll go ahead and break out of the slide and go into the site. So here is the main homepage. If you notice right off the bat, the very first thing that you'll notice about our legislative website compared to other states is that we just give you a search box right off the bat because everyone's familiar with Google or Bing or whatever search engine they use. This site is actually not brand new. It was revamped by my team and I about 4 years ago. And when we had kind of gone through the revamp, we did a lot of studies and metrics and realized that there are quite a few types of users. There are different users who come to our site for different reasons. So for example, if you are someone who is very aware and knows the specifics about a specific piece of legislation that you're interested in, you can go ahead and type that in there. Let's say I want to know about the budget bill, and it'll go ahead and bring that up. Context sensitive wise, you can click on that or search for it. There might be folks who come and say, you know what, I know a little bit about the thing that I'm interested in, but I don't know the specifics like the bill number or anything like that. Obviously, you can do keyword searches. So if I type in the word appropriations, and then let's say fiscal, it'll do its best to come up with the site and say, hey, I've bolded the terms that you've entered. I'm going to give you some suggestions as to what I think you're looking for. And there's a lot of reasons why it gives you this. Sort of the thinking behind the site is that, it looks at the timeliness of the bill. It looks at the popularity of the bill, of what's going on recently. It looks at the number of times that word or term has appeared in the actual piece of legislation. So there's a lot that's kind of going on beneath the covers, so to speak, that'll do that. But, we also found out that there are a lot of people who just visit the site who don't know really anything about who their members are, who the legislators are, who the legislature is, and who their legislators are. And they are either have an interest about that, or they have an interest in government, their state government, or an interest about the building. You know, all those things are things that we have to sort of account for. So what I'll do is I'll take a sort of a track out of order, and I'll just show you what someone who's looking for their legislator is. How do I even find my legislator? Is it front and center? So you'll notice that everything has a sort of a 1 or 2 click away drop bar. Everything that you see here, bills and laws, legislators, committees and commissions, they're all a click away from something that we think is fairly important for you to see. And this menu, a lot of people misunderstand it. These aren't just section headings. Everything that you see in the menu is a clickable item. So if I wanted to see, you know, let's see, all the members, I could go ahead and click that. If I knew the name of my favorite representative, then I could go ahead and type that, and the system will go ahead and find it and say, hey, there it is. You can click on that and it'll bring you right to that member's bio page. But a lot of times people don't really know where they are. So 2 things. We know that people know what their address is, obviously, right? And they probably know where they are on a map. So we thought, you know, the old way of doing this is still here for accessibility purposes, for folks who are, you know, hard of sight, hard of vision. But we really got a lot of feedback to say that this is not the most intuitive way to do that. So we came up with a way of just utilizing Google Maps and saying, you know what, if I know my address, sure, I can type it in. I'll type in 555 Main Street. Let's say I live on that in Woburn. Sounds good. It'll go ahead and bring that up, and it'll bring up the districts and it'll outline them in real time. But let's say I want to actually scroll around the map. Let's say I want to pick this part of the state right here. It'll actually bring up, oh, well, hey, I've got my representative is Mindy Dom, and it'll actually show me who my senator is as well. If I sort of creep down in here, it'll actually show me, well, it's still Representative Dom, but in this case, the senator has changed. So you can see how this actually gives an interactive way for the end user to just literally know more about their site. It's kind of fun to just pop around the state, look at how the different districts are sized and formed depending on what part of the state they're in. You know, obviously it gets to be very complicated if you go into Boston proper itself. We allow you to zoom in and out of the site and do things like that. But there are multiple ways to actually go ahead and find that. So once you find that representative, you can go ahead and click. And again, we try to make it so that there are multiple ways to get to the same information. We obviously do that by design because we want people to be able to find things. It's very difficult already as it is. There's just so much information, as you can imagine, with general laws and session laws and bills. It's very hard to make it intuitive from a sort of point and click standpoint. So briefly, I'll go through this, you know, again, the day in the life. Oh, well, I actually found out my representative is Mindy Dom in the 3rd Hampshire District. I find out some State House information about her, her office email, her office location within the building, when we're finally able to go back in the outside world, phone numbers for the district office and whatnot. There's also a context sensitive set of tabs. So you could see here all the bills that Representative Dom has sponsored and co-sponsored. You can see she's been quite busy. And there are hyperlinks to all of the pieces of legislation that she's involved with, which you can click on, which I'll show you in a second. You can see all the committees that either the member that you're choosing is a part of, or in this case, vice chairs. And you can also take a look at the map, a non-interactive static map of the district that we just were looking at in there. And real quickly, the bills kind of go off in a more detailed tangent. So I'll kind of talk through the more obvious things. Let's say I click on a committee that I'm interested in a member for. You can actually see the page that has the House contact and the Senate contact for that committee, as well as the phone number. And it tells you all the bills that they're sponsoring, the hearings that are coming up, and sort of a blurb, really legislative speak blurb about what the committee is. I always kind of laugh at that when they kind of put that in there. So yeah, so this is a very quick way to, again, click on a link. It goes back to the bio page. Again, the idea of this whole thing is to give you many different ways to the same information. So I noticed that one of the things that someone had asked, and again, I'm going to sort of go all over the place here, is that, you know, how do you actually follow a bill? So an interesting thing about our site, it's not very clear, is that there's always a star anywhere that you see something that's followable, if that makes sense. So if you visit our site, you'll notice that there's a star next to representative's name. There's a star next to bills. There's a star next to pretty much everything that you can see on the site. And if you click on that, you're actually now following it. And we've gotten a lot of feedback that that is not very clear. I totally understand that. So we're sort of in the process of a revamp to make this a little bit more visible. But for you insiders, so to speak, you now know what that star is about, right? The star is there for you to actually follow things. And I'll get into a little bit more detail on that, since I sort of heard that as one of the primary questions for this. So that's sort of a day in the life. And we can actually dive a bit deeper into the actual bills subject here. So bills, again, a click away. If you want to know pretty much everything about all bills, you can go ahead and do that. A lot of information here, but basically what this does is if you searched for something, you can actually finite sort of granularly dig down deeper into a specific piece of information. So if there's a bill that I'm interested in and I wanted to know about the amendments, maybe the general laws that tie into that somehow, the journals, and so on and so forth, I can go ahead and do that. And it's this sort of concept of refiners that you can apply to your search results that allows you to really sort of hone in on a specific piece of information that you might be interested in. Again, here's a return of that whole star concept, and I can go ahead and follow those bills, and I'll show you where you would track that in a little bit. And then it gives you all of these other options. Overwhelming, I totally get that, but we're trying to cater to both the power user and to the user who just is visiting our site or learning about the site for the first time. Any questions so far? I know I'm talking a mile a minute and there's a lot of stuff going on here. All right, great. All right, so with that, I'll kind of go back into the PowerPoint and touch upon some of the things that I think I may have missed. So let's talk about the bills and bill history. So I'll exit out of there and go back to the site. So if you actually go into a specific bill, let's actually go search for something that I've sort of pre-vetted for us.
Actually, Paul, can I just ask you to define one?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
Can you, and I didn't know this before I got to the legislature. Could you just define what is the journal for folks and how it can be used for people?
Sure, absolutely. So great question.
I don't know if folks know that that is a resource that's available to them.
Yes, very good point. So the journal is literally a way for you to see all the proceedings and the steps that happen in those proceedings. So for example, if there was a formal session that occurred last week, the journal is an official sort of minutes, note by note minutes of what happened in that particular event. And you can find journals by basically going to, I believe, bills, and there are broken out into House and Senate journals. And there's another way to get to this, but I'll actually show this to you from this way. You can download all the journals to date. You can download journals from the past. And if I open one up, it'll give you an idea. These are unfortunately PDFs for the House, but they'll open up into a sort of a document that you can view. It's actually a really great segue, Representative Dom, to what I was about to show though, which is you can actually look at that journal information, for example, specifically roll calls in the details of a bill history. So for example, this is a sort of the parent bill or the seed bill of the eventual budget bill that was passed last week or a couple of weeks ago that the House had stayed up late for. And you can see that there's a little, obviously, synopsis or emergency preamble. You can view the text of the bill, print the bill. In this case, the bill is so large, we disable it for this. But for 99% of the bills that you see, you can actually download them. You can actually download the PDF of the bill itself in all its entirety. But here's an interesting point. So tying back to the journals in a way, you could see that on the 15th, it was passed out of the House Ways and Means, and it was on that very same day referred to the Committee on Steering and Policy. And it goes on, but in this sort of minute by minute take, you'll notice that, hey, on the 26th, when they met for session, an amendment 413 was adopted. In this case, it was unanimous, but I'd like to see more about that. You can actually click on the yeas and nays, and this will bring up a portion of the information that you can find in the journal that actually shows how your member of interest voted. Members can vote to say yay, nay, present, or abstain, which is just a not vote. But that's sort of an interesting way where you can really, if you know where you're going, dig into the nitty gritty of the details of what it is that you're looking for. So there's a wealth of information on this site in terms of bills and all the actions the legislature takes, but you just have to kind of know where you're going. And that's what I'm hopefully trying to show you here today. We also show a list of similar bills, in this case, the final budget bill that came about, and so on and so forth. So that's literally what looking at the details of what specific bills are. In this case, this bill had a lot of amendments. So there's an amendment context sensitive tab. This tab shows, what the consolidated amendments were there, details about what the, for example, education and local aid. If I click on that, it'll actually give me the actual amendment to the bill in that. Again, above my understanding of expertise, but a lot of this is information that, content aggregators and people in the legal industry or whatnot would find useful, but it's all there for the public to see. Quickly go back to this. All right. And the budget. Okay, so we sort of taglined into that. The budget is obviously a very big component for the legislature. It's something that happens every year. In this case, the fiscal budget FY 2020, FY 2022 is there front and center for us. So an interesting part of the site, you have to unfortunately scroll down a bit, but you'll notice that there's a timeline, and this timeline is in real time. I mean, these actions don't take place minute by minute, but this is a current step-by-step journey of this year's FY 2022 budget. So you can see that at this point in May, early May, we've already passed. The governor's sent forth his initial budget. The House met. The Ways and Means have proposed a budget for the House. The House debated it. We just saw some of the amendments and the votes on that. And then ultimately the House released a budget. And that budget is linkable. You can find out, click download the PDF to that. You can see the same timeline here sort of reiterated for your convenience. And now you know where it is. Where is the budget right now? I'd like to know what's happening. Right now, it's currently in the Senate Ways and Means. So they're putting that together, which means that logically there's going to be a Senate debate, a budget's going to be proposed, and then conference committees where everyone will get together and sort of hash out the details. And then the final budget gets published. So again, another way of looking at this site. We try to basically put as much information as we can in this homepage, mega menus with 1 or 2 clicks away to the major information, sort of popular things that are kind of going on, hearings and events, list of a way to find your members, a link to the Constitution, and then the budget, and then some popular bills and popular general laws. We actually also get a lot of questions on things that don't pertain to the legislature, unfortunately. So we go ahead and say, hey, if you have a question that isn't necessarily part of the legislature's purview, we sort of give you some quick links to that as well. All right. Any questions on that thus far? Okay. All right. So again, just to keep time short, we will move on to the next features, but I can certainly revisit this at any time. And by all means, stop me if there's something you'd like me to cover instead. All right. So the first secret is a little bit of a misnomer. I lied. I cheated. The secret is not really a secret. I just didn't have a good place for it. It's actually how to find your legislator. So you actually saw a secret. I think the reason why I put it here is the take-home point of this map, this interactive map, is not just for me to try to show it off to you. It's that we actually do listen to feedback. We got a lot of tacit feedback from constituents and from people who use the site. And they said, listen, I just don't really like the way you're telling me to fill out a form and just try to find my local legislator, my state legislator. So we went ahead and developed something like this for them. All right. The second secret, and again, I'm going to go off, I'm going to go stick with this thing here, but if there's something you'd rather have me cover, I'll go ahead and do it. But on a more lighthearted note, I'll go over some of the secret features of the site. So from a serious standpoint, in terms of actually drafting legislation, which is all the hard work that Representative Dom and her colleagues do, the constituents are actually empowered to do so. We have something called the drafting manual, which is a very lengthy document, but it actually goes through a lot of the ways that legislation is actually drafted by the legislature themselves. We give a glossary of terms for people so that they can understand what legislative speak is. And we actually offer constituents and users of the site what the Constitution is, so you can kind of see the general laws, what kind of laws exist and whatnot. That's sort of the serious side of this. We're really trying to empower people to get as much information as they can. And even if they want, sort of maybe take a stab at sort of crafting their own. But what we did out of lightheartedness is tucked away in a corner here is a create your own bill. This is a secret sort of an Easter egg. And the idea of this is to actually create your own bill. Now, obviously, this is not a real bill. This was really created more for sort of teachers to kind of step their classrooms through. But if I, as myself, I'll go ahead and type my name in. I can't do that correctly. And I'll say I'm part of the House. And let's say that, I want to change the donut of the Commonwealth. And interestingly enough, I actually found out that Boston cream, I believe, is actually the official donut of the Commonwealth. But we're trying to be lighthearted. Let's say I don't agree with that. I like it to be glazed chocolate, and I want to propose that. So I'll actually go ahead with the idea. It all starts out with an idea. It tells you a little bit about the bill. I'll go ahead and do next. Now, we dub this portion of the site the demo killer. It's all randomized by the system, and I'm sure it's going to stop us right in our tracks. But let's go ahead and give it a shot, right? So we moved from an idea to a petition. So we've got the start of our bill. It's going to be H134. And we're going to head and try to file this. It's going to stop me. I know this for sure. All right, so it's going to actually say the committee hearing. So let's file the committee report. Let's see if it stops us. Great. So it actually didn't stop us today. That's kind of rare. So it's a congratulations. The committee reported favorably on it. So we're moving along the chain here, and we're going to actually continue to go next. Oh, I'm definitely going to get stopped here. Let's see. So now it's up for debate. It's up for second and third reading, and finally engrossment. Let's see what happens here. I'm laughing because it never does this. So if it passes the next one, I think we should all play the lottery today. This is pretty incredible. So it says, congratulations, it's gone through the debate. It's sort of in a way, it's not trying to be lighthearted and poke fun at this. The process is actually very serious and sometimes lengthy, and it's definitely a lot of work, but we're just trying to highlight this for people who are interested in it. And let's go ahead and see if it gets enactment. Let's see what the governor's action is. There it goes. So it came back. So you can start a new bill. Had it been passed, it would say it is now enacted and it becomes law, and it would allow you to download a copy of the bill. But one thing that I wanted to show you is as you do this is all sort of lighthearted and fun, but one of the things that we did is we actually had the idea of the concept of achievements. And anyone who's familiar with video games or certain kinds of websites, they actually let you do that. And the reason behind that is, although it's sort of lighthearted in its sort of the way it's surfaced, it's actually pretty useful in terms of what we're trying to do. You'll notice that My Legislature is here. It's a way to create an account on the site, and it allows you to see your progress. So one of the ways that we really want to engage people in using the site is to give them some sort of a gamification so that they can want to come back and progress in their knowledge of the legislature. So in this case, I actually went through and I actually followed a bill, and I actually tried to draft a bill, and it says that I actually am sort of on my way to completing some of these goals. And if you do complete them, you get a badge. We try to unlock a bunch of different badges for you so that you can kind of see what you have left. Again, sort of lighthearted, but it gives you a way to come back. And that's one of the other secrets that we found out that people tend to enjoy. And then the last sort of hidden feature is that there's actually a built-in time machine in the site. What I mean by that is if you actually go into, let's say, all bills, if you notice, the site obviously tells you what general court you are in. So we are currently in 2021 in the 192nd General Court. The General Court is a 2-year session, and we are actually in the 192. If you wanted to find something, though, you can see that we're in 2021 because we're in COVID realities, right? A lot of the popular bills, should come as no surprise, have to do with COVID-19. If I were to actually click on Reset General Court, it allows me to basically go back in time. And the interesting thing about this is if I go back into, let's say, 2009 and apply refined filters, you'll see that the entire site is kind of shifted focus, and it's now like a snapshot of when you were back in time at that general court. So in this case, many general courts ago, the 186th, what was hot at that point in time? It looks like an act to provide waterfront loans for development was sort of the hot topic of the day, right? So again, sort of a time machine that lets you go back, and all of the refiners that you see, all of the laws, all the journals, they all are contextually reset for that sort of a little sort of a insider info there that you have. I'll go ahead and go back to the present time of COVID, and we'll go forward and move on. All right. And then, so one of the things I heard before the meeting got started, or in the beginning of the meeting rather, is how to track legislation. So there's a little bit of a mea culpa here for us. We are actually heavily revamping this as we speak. So, it's nice to click on a star and follow something, but, there's going to be a revamp of the way that you can actually track progress through your site. But for now, I'll quickly show you what you can do to do that. So again, if you sign up for My Legislature and you go into your dashboard, you'll see all the different things that you are following. In this case, as you saw earlier, I just starred Representative Dom, and that's why she shows up under My Legislature, My Legislators. You can also enter your address in your profile, and it'll automatically show you the legislators that are representative of your particular district, of your particular address. And it'll show you all your followed bills. It'll recommend other things, and you can follow testimonies. And if you wanted to give testimony online, it'll tell you which ones you are signed up for in here. The one drawback to this is that you have to create an account, which a lot of people choose not to do. And you also have to go into the site to see where your progress is. We do have email updates when you track things like hearings. So if you follow a hearing, I'll go back into the site, the main page. Let's say I'm interested in an upcoming hearing, and I'll go ahead and look at hearings and events. So clicking on hearing and events, again, 1 or 2 clicks away, you'll see all of the hearings that are coming up, and you can go back in time and view all of them as well. And anything that has a video archive means that the video is archived for you to see. And if it is going to say live, it means that it will be live streamed for that moment. In this case, it's actually going on live right now, and we can kind of see that. So right now, let's see, there's a Senate Committee on Global Warming. You could actually watch the video. And then there's things up and coming. So if I wanted to actually say, you know what, I want to go back to my favorite legislator, and I'm going to go ahead into her profile. And I'm particularly interested in, let's say, a hearing that the Representative Dom had been a part of. I can go ahead and easily do that by looking at her committee and seeing any upcoming hearings that are available for that committee. So for example, I could go to the committee where she's vice chair, and I can go ahead and see what sort of hearings are up and coming. All right. And if I follow this, I will now be notified in email and on the site when my hearings are actually there. Oh, looks like it's not followed. Okay, there it is. All right, so virtual hearing is followed. It'll give you an agenda and a bills if they're offered. If I had signed up and if it offered an allowed testimony, it would allow me to do that here as well. All right, and then where are we going forward with this? Well, I really can't share too much yet because a lot of it is still a work in progress. But what I can tell you is that this is one of the, what I think personally are the major shortcomings of our site. We're going to revamp this in a way so that you can really get a deeper dive into following the bills. We have to sort of walk that fine line between spamming people and texting people all the time and, trying to, really be a nuisance to folks. But we're definitely going to focus on trying to make getting you updates on what you're interested in terms of what the legislature is doing a lot easier. And it's hopefully something that you will see is sort of a major sea change there. And that pretty much wraps it up. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. As I promised, I left my email in here, and feel free to ask me any questions now, after the fact, if you come up with any. Pretty much ask me anything, and I'm more than happy to talk about it. If it's something that I can provide you a decent answer on, I certainly will.
Thank you so much, Paul. I didn't realize that the website will notify people. I'm glad you went back to this page. If they're following a bill or a hearing, the website will email you when the hearing is coming up. Is that what you said?
Well, it will email you, Representative, for the hearings, and for the bills, it actually won't at the moment, but you can actually see information and progress on the on your specific bill if you actually log back into the site. And that's one of the bigger shortcomings. We understand that, you know, bills are obviously one of the major things that people want to follow. You know, rather than go to let's say the homepage of our site and look at the timeline of where the budget is, you know, maybe I'd like a notification on my phone that you know, the bill has now passed to the next state, which would then maybe prompt me to be, we want to revisit the site and see more
Right.
details about what took place there. Yeah, so
And
that level of interactivity is what we're working towards.
right, and reconnect with your legislator about what you want them to do next.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point as well, Representative. You know, I think a lot of the things that we want to do is reach out and work with you on some ideas on how we can make this a little bit more interactive or more to your liking, so that, you know, it really is a tool, not just for you to help reach out to your constituents, but for your constituents to do the same thing and reach out to you. You know, and there's a lot of things that I think we can do here. Again, this is sort of a start. You know, we are a site that gets bombarded with content aggregators every single moment. So what we try to do is, you know, with this first pass a few years back, we tried to make sure that the site was stable and was able to enhance, you know, some of the aspects that we just talked about. What we're really doing is we have now sort of branched and forked in a different direction. We really are saving a lot of our bandwidth for the end users. And that's why we designed it with the end user in mind. You know, it's really not conducive for a content aggregator to find a search button or a search box. They hate that because they're a robot. They're not going to go ahead and type things in and try to find it then. This is really meant for you, the user. And what we do now is we're actually opening, I'm going to get a little bit technical here for anyone who's interested in that. But, you know, if you have an interest in, like, let's say you're a content aggregator and you want to actually just get at the meat and potatoes of the site through an API. Oops, that's not the right URL. If you, we have an API, it's called the Swagger API. And this basically will allow you as a content aggregator to focus on getting information this way. So in other words, don't try to hit our site and kill it with, you know, all these requests for information. We'd much rather have you interact directly with our site, call some of these application programming interfaces, get at the documents and the bills for yourself, and then offer them up as a result in search. Because anytime anyone uses Google and finds out about something, you know, searches for a bill, whether or not it brings you back to our site, as long as they give you accurate information about what you're looking for, well, then that's a win for us, right? We're just trying to be transparent to you. But we're trying to say, hey, you know what, ease up on actually going to our site. And now that we have this sort of API in place, we can really focus on, you know, doing some of the things that the representative just mentioned, really trying to reach out and make the site even more interactive than it is right now.
Thank you. Victoria, your hand is up.
Oh, I apologize, Victoria. Sorry, I'll answer your question.
Oh, no worries. I had the same question that I believe I saw Amanda post in the chat, which
Okay.
is a question about whether or not there are ways to search for your particular interest on the site. If you might have a nonprofit that's focused on children's issues or anti-poverty issues, are there any mechanisms here that let us find things related to those issues?
It's a great question. And the long and the short of it is, if there's information on our site about that, it is something that you can find and search. However, the way that the search engine is right now is it's very tuned to specific parts of the site. So for example, it's going to heavily weight things for right or for wrong, you know, bills that are popular, and things like that will skew the results in the background. It's actually a great question, because the honest answer is part of that sort of revamp that I'm talking about is a way to focus on that. Because if we are able to have folks sort of key in on their interests through building a profile with us, that's when we can really offer specific information to you as a user of our site. You know, so for example, if we know more about your interests, we know more about what it is that you're following, maybe an organization that you're willing to say you're a part of, you know, we can really start to deep dive into, you know, offering information that's really pertinent and almost personalized for just you. And that's the next phase of what we're trying to achieve. So when I talk about some of these, you know, fluffy things, you know, they're all well and good, but sort of the underlying goal of that is to actually get people to be willing to create a profile and start to give us some sort of metrics on what we can actually offer you that's specific. I know it's a sort of generic answer to your question, but right now it's a little bit difficult to find specific things. But if there is information in the legislature about it, what I can say is, even if it's not very clear, it is there for you. For example, if I just go back, let's say I talk about parks. Let's just do something innocuous like that, right? If I go into parks, I'll actually find a bevy of things, but maybe one way that you can sort of find out more about that is if you search instead of everything, which is just going to give you a deep dive of everything that is on the site for that, you can narrowly focus in on things. It's still going to be a lot of information, to be honest, but you can look at bills, you can look at maybe reports, you can maybe find legislators who are interested in parks, something along those lines. Is really a little bit less information on how they're trying to surface that information to you. But the point is that we're trying to allow people to sort of granularize their searches so that they can get to what they're looking for.
I think also sometimes it's less about anti-poverty, but more about what strategy is being used around anti-poverty, because that's where the legislation will come into be. So like, if you put in the search anti-poverty, I don't think much would come up, but if you put in earned income tax credit,
Right.
then it probably generates some hits. Or early education and childcare,
Mhm.
that would generate, or workforce development. It's more about like, how do we address it? Because that's where the legislation ends up focusing.
Great
So I
point.
think, Victoria, that, and before the redo, that might be one way to identify what's out there of interest.
I think that's a great tip. That's a great way to get at some of this.
Yeah, and again, the challenge is that there is so much information. I mean, you can see how we sort of have to break it out in sort of that time machine sort of concept. There is a lot of information on the site, and it's just very, it's a challenge. It's a challenge to kind of make that available to people without sort of being overwhelming.
I'm looking at what Amanda has written. So I just want to pass this along to you, Paul, so that you might want to respond to it. It says, I did see when I chose my interests upon setting up the account on my homepage, there are now recommendations on bills I may be interested in based on the interests I identified. So that's pretty cool that it's kind of like going to the bookshop, right? If you're interested in this book, then you might want these books. So if you want this bill, you might be interested in these other ones.
Yeah, that's really, we're grateful for that feedback and the question. I think we could do better with the way that we recommend things, depending on what you're actually following. Some of these recommendations and, bills that we put out there, popular bills, will definitely sort of get a wrinkle in the eye there for when you see them. But just know that in the background, in some fashion, there is some sort of correlation that the system thinks there is. And again, it's sort of it's a challenge. Some of these interests are not readily apparent at the surface level, but again, sort of the refinement that we're trying to do is really difficult for us. The real game changer that I guess I'm trying to say is that now that we're able to break apart the need to service two masters, if you will, we can focus on the actual true entity that we really want to focus on, which is you as a person. That's when I took on this role for the legislature. Unlike my predecessor, that was really my biggest focus. My focus was, this is actually not a site for content aggregators. They can go ahead and do that. That's fine. I have no problems with it. But it's really a site for all of you. You're the taxpayers, right? And you'd like to see what your legislature is doing. So we actually are, again, slowly moving that ship towards taking the focus there, and that's where it'll stay. It'll be sort of an evolution of all the things that we're trying to build here.
Victoria.
Thank you. I just saw a great question in the chat from Lexi, who is asking, when I follow a bill, will I receive email updates if the bill's status changes? Can you let us know anything about that?
Sure. So I think it will do that for hearings. My understanding right now, and I could be wrong, and if that's the case, that's actually good news. But I believe for bills, it actually does not send an email out. And I'll tell you briefly why that is. I think with bills, part of the reasoning is that we're trying to be careful about not spamming people. If it's an interest of your bill, then we definitely should be doing that. The next generation of this build, which is around the corner, this build of the website, will absolutely do that. It'll allow you to be texted. It'll allow you to receive emails. You can obviously log into the site with your profile, and you can track the latest whereabouts of that way. That you can do now as well. And not to let too much out of the bag, but you'll also be able to go on your mobile device and be able to, interactively follow items on your phone in a native way there. So a lot of work is being done to sort of improve this. Unfortunately, it's with the limited resources that I have, it's hard to sort of put piecemeal progress out there where I really should be doing that. But we're hoping to create sort of a sea change going forward.
Mhm.
Thank you, Paul. I mean, I think that you do a great deal and under incredibly sort of unusual circumstances. And I also just want to point out to folks that when COVID hit and we went into emergency session, the whole legislature went remote. And so in addition to trying to redo this website to make it more user-friendly and more user-informative, Paul's entire department is also, deeply involved in making sure that every public hearing is remote, that our virtual voting is working, like all those other pieces that weren't even in existence over a year ago. So thank you for that
Thank
work.
you. My pleasure. Thanks.
Are there any other questions that people have? I'm just looking to see.
Paul, I have a search question.
Sure.
This is Katie. I'm wondering if it's possible to search bills by the name that they are commonly referred to as opposed to their formal name. So, for example, the Cherish Act is an acronym for several words that I don't know off the top of my head.
Right.
And I'm sure most people don't as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the good news is that there's definitely something that we're already testing that will help with that. And the interest in the interim, there's ways that you can kind of do that. So, for example, I know that there was a bill. It was I think it was known or nicknamed as like the Melissa Law, and in your case, the Cherish Act. What we're basically trying to do is we're trying to allow in-laws, which is this backend system that the representative and Caitlin are aware of. It's probably not readily evident to the folks in COSA, but there's a sort of a backend system that we use to actually do the legislation, to create the legislation for this endpoint, which is this website. And what we're going to allow to do is allow you to put in some friendly name keywords. So, for example, if you were to work on a bill and you wanted to dub it the Cherish bill, those terms will be available in a search, so that when you actually go to this site, you can actually search for it and it'll make a tie-in back to that specific piece of legislation. Right now, sometimes you'll actually get it if you see something briefly called about that somewhere in the site. It might fall down in the results, but we'll go ahead and try it to my detriment, I'm sure. But we'll call it the, what was the exact terms, Katie?
I think it's the Cherish Act.
Cherish Act. Okay, let's go ahead and try that. All right, so it did come up with something. It was sort of a subset of the H4000 parent budget bill. And in this case, it tells you about the Cherish Act FY22 funding. And again, not readily apparent, but there is, according to the system in its brain, it says that there's some sort of a tie-in to the Special Education Subcommittee report. But if I were to click on this, it looks like that amendment may have had those keywords in it. So if I actually try to find something in there, let's see if the word cherish is in here. Yeah, it looks like it just picked that up. Not particularly impressive, but because someone had used the term cherish, it actually did pick it up. So again, if there's anything good about this, is that it sort of validates what I was saying, that if there is information in our site or in our databases regarding something that you're looking for, by hook or by crook, there is a way at it. It just may not be the most pleasant. But this kind of thing is a really great point, because if this sort of metadata, Cherish Act, were attached to a specific piece or pieces of legislation, it will make that sort of correlation a lot more organically, and it'll allow you to search for things like that.
So in a sense, when legislators file the legislation on a different website, which is called laws,
Right.
which allows you not only to put the text, but any sponsors and maybe a brief summary, then there might also be like a new window or a new space that would say nickname or, otherwise known as, or,
Exactly.
and
Yes.
then, and the Cherish Act is like one example. The Healthy Youth Act, I would think, would be another example, where residents think of it as one thing because the advocates are pushing the nickname to it, but the legislature has the much more formal name. So we need to sort of build those two together.
Absolutely. Nobody in the public is probably going to know the Cherish Act is H4000. I mean, there might be some users who do, right? But, for the most part, yes, you're absolutely right. And that Cherish Act is something that should come up front and center as relevant to whatever bill, in this case, it's H4000 that it's a part of. Yeah, but you nailed it, Representative. That's exactly what we're trying to do. There's a lot of other things behind the scene that we're adding right now. So in addition to just having that be associated with it, there are some heuristics that we're building in that allow a lot of this technology to kind of, work together in concert. But again, a lot of slow moving just because we have had an unfortunate plan of a series of events this past year. These things were actually slated to go out. I'm going to shoot myself here a year ago, but we all know what happened in the last year. So we're right around the corner with this, though. I can promise you that.
Thank you. Are there
Absolutely.
any other questions? Because I realize we're at 10:54. So I don't wanna, So I just want to, before I give it over back to Jeff or Victoria or both, I just want to, Paul, thank you so much.
Oh, my
This has
pleasure.
been great. I love the fact that people now see that the roll calls are in the journal and they can see them directly if they can't get them from their legislators. I love the fact that you're working on an email that can go out to people around alerts with bills, if their bill advances in one way or the other, so that they can track it that way. And I'm really grateful for your time and all of your efforts to make the website so much more accessible to people. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Jeff, Victoria?
Sure. Well, again, thank you to Representative Mindy Dom and Paul for your time today. This was really great. I had no idea that the website was so user friendly and so intuitive, and I thought the sort of game features were really amazing. I'm actually probably going to start an account maybe at lunch hour today or right after I get off this call if there's a little bit of time. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We do have about 5 minutes. I don't